Today's story is called The Little Bird That Landed on Mr. Ellis's Porch Rail. Welcome to Warm Life Stories. If you enjoy gentle stories like this, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's begin. It was a quiet morning, the kind of morning that didn't ask anything of you, the kind that simply arrived and waited. A soft light rested along the wooden porch rail, warming the grain of the old boards the way it had done for years. Not bright, not dramatic, just enough to let the day begin gently. Somewhere down the street, a screen door closed with a familiar creak. Then, nothing again. The air was cool, but gentle. A light breeze moved through the yard, barely stirring the leaves of the maple tree near the fence. Everything felt unhurried, as if time itself had decided to sit down for a while. Mr. Ellis was already awake. He always was, these days. He sat in his usual chair on the porch, the one on the right, his back straight, his movements slow and deliberate. In his hands, he held a chipped ceramic mug. A thin crack near the handle caught the light for a moment before his thumb passed over it, absent-mindedly, as it always did. He didn't rush his mornings anymore. There was no reason to. The porch boards gave a soft creak as he shifted his weight, settling in the way someone does when they know they'll be staying a while. From where he sat, he could see the quiet street, the small front yard, and the porch rail that ran the length of the house, smooth in some places, worn thin in others. He reached for the cloth resting beside him and began to wipe the rail. Slow, steady. The motion followed the same path it had followed countless mornings before. It wasn't dirty. It rarely was. But the motion mattered to him. Wipe, pause, then wipe again. His breathing fell into rhythm with his hand. Somewhere nearby, birds stirred. Their sounds drifted through the air, not close enough to demand attention, but present enough to be noticed. Mr. Ellis listened, without turning his head. He never tried to name them anymore. It was enough simply to know they were there. For a long moment, nothing else happened. And that was the point. This porch had seen many mornings like this one. Some colder, some louder, some filled with conversation and the quiet clink of two mugs instead of one. But this morning belonged to the stillness, and Mr. Ellis accepted it the way he accepted most things, now with calm and without resistance. A narrow patch of sunlight slowly crept across the porch floor, inching its way toward his shoes. He watched it without really watching, his eyes soft, unfocused. The light seemed to remind him without words that the day was moving forward, whether he hurried or not. Inside the house, the old clock remained silent. It hadn't ticked in years. Mr. Ellis had never fixed it. Some things, he believed, didn't need fixing. He paused, resting his hand on the rail, feeling the cool wood beneath his palm. The porch rail had always been there, steady, familiar, quietly holding the weight of years and memories, without asking for anything in return. He took a slow sip from his mug. The coffee was warm, simple, exactly how he liked it. No sugar, no fuss. The breeze returned, just briefly, lifting the edge of his sweater and carrying with it the faint scent of grass from somewhere nearby. Mr. Ellis breathed in, then out. The moment settled around him, complete in its simplicity. He didn't know it yet, but something small was about to arrive. Not loudly, not urgently, just enough to be noticed. If someone was paying attention, and Mr. Ellis was. Mr. Ellis had lived in this house for a long time, long enough to know every sound it made, long enough to recognize the way the porch boards spoke back when he stepped in just the right place. The house wasn't large. It never had been. A modest wooden place built sometime in the early 60s, with paint that had faded softly instead of peeling. It sat on a quiet street where people waved more often than they hurried, and where mornings still felt like mornings were meant to feel. Mr. Ellis liked that. He had moved here as a younger man, back when his shoulders were broader and his steps were quicker, back when the porch chairs were new, and the rail still smelled faintly of fresh wood. Over the years, the house had aged the way people do, slowly, honestly, without apology. So had he. At 74, Mr. Ellis moved carefully, but not weakly. His steps were measured, deliberate. He had learned that there was no prize for rushing through the day. Whatever needed to be done would wait, and whatever couldn't wait usually wasn't worth the hurry. Each morning followed a familiar rhythm. He boiled water the old-fashioned way, no machine, just a kettle and patience. He poured the coffee into the same chipped mug he'd used for years, the one with the small crack near the handle. He liked the way it fit his hand, liked the way it felt known. After that, he stepped outside, always the porch first. He sat in the chair on the right, without thinking about it. He never chose it. It simply became his. The other chair stayed where it was, facing the yard, catching the same light it always had. Mr. Ellis didn't move it. Some arrangements didn't need adjusting. From his seat, he could see most of what mattered to him now. The maple tree by the fence, the short stretch of sidewalk, the mailbox at the end of the drive. He noticed things other people passed by. The way the light changed, from pale to warm, as the sun climbed higher. The way the air smelled different after a cool night. The way quiet had its own texture, if you let it stay long enough. Mr. Ellis didn't talk much anymore. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he had learned that not everything needed words. Silence, he found, could be a kind companion if you treated it gently. There were people in his life, though. Quiet connections, familiar faces. Mrs. Harper lived 2 houses down. She waved most mornings, sometimes carrying a container she insisted he take. Tommy, the neighbor boy, often stopped by after school with questions about tools or homework. And then there was the mailman, Mr. Clark, who nodded politely each day as he slipped letters through the slot. These small exchanges mattered more to Mr. Ellis than he ever admitted. He kept his routines simple. In the afternoons, he tended to the rosebush Maggie had planted years ago. He trimmed it carefully, never too much. In the evenings, he listened to jazz on the old radio by the window, the volume low, the melodies familiar enough to feel like company. He didn't think of these habits as rituals. They were just life. Life, lived quietly. There were things he avoided, too. Drawers he didn't open often. Letters he reread only on certain days. Memories that arrived whether he invited them or not. But on the porch, in the morning light, those things stayed at a distance. The porch gave him space. Space to breathe. Space to remember without sinking too deeply. Mr. Ellis rested his hands on his knees and looked out toward the street again. A car passed slowly. Someone down the block laughed. The world went on, gently, without asking him to keep up. He liked that it didn't demand much from him anymore. He was still here, still noticing, still part of the quiet unfolding of the day. And as he sat there, wrapped in the comfort of familiar habits and an unhurried morning, Mr. Ellis had no way of knowing that this day, like so many others, was about to offer him something small, something easy to miss, something that would land softly, right where he could see it. There were times when the porch felt fuller than it did now. Not louder, just fuller. Mr. Ellis didn't always think about those times. He had learned, over the years, how to let memories come and go without chasing them. But some mornings, especially quiet ones like this, they found their way back on their own. The porch rail beneath his hand had once been warmer, not from the sun, but from another palm resting there beside his. Maggie used to sit out here with him. She preferred the other chair, the one facing the yard. She liked to watch the light move through the leaves, liked to guess how warm the day would turn out to be. Sometimes she brought her coffee, other times just a small plate with toast she never quite finished. She had a habit of humming without realizing it. Nothing loud. Nothing anyone else would notice from the street. Just a soft tune that drifted in and out, as natural as breathing. Mr. Ellis could never remember the melody later, only the feeling it left behind. On those mornings, the porch sounded different. There was more movement, more pauses filled with shared glances instead of silence. The clink of 2 mugs, the faint scrape of a chair being pulled closer when the breeze turned cool. Mr. Ellis shifted slightly in his seat now, the memory settling gently rather than sharply. He didn't smile. Exactly. His expression softened, the way it always did when Maggie came to mind. She had loved small things. The way the roses bloomed, no matter how little attention they received. The way birds seemed to return to the same spots each year. The comfort of sitting side by side without needing conversation. She used to say the porch was her favorite part of the house. Not the kitchen, not the bedroom, the porch. "It lets you belong to the day," she once told him. At the time, he hadn't thought much about what she meant. Now, he understood. The breeze brushed past him again, carrying a trace of warmth with it, and for a moment, he could almost feel Maggie's sweater sleeve against his arm. The porch remembered things, even when people didn't speak them aloud. Mr. Ellis glanced at the empty chair across from him. It sat exactly where it always had. He hadn't moved it after Maggie passed. Not out of sadness, not out of hope. It simply felt right to leave it be. Some spaces hold meaning best when they remain unchanged. He remembered other mornings too, quieter ones, toward the end. Mornings when Maggie sat wrapped in a blanket, her hands thinner, her humming softer. Even then, she asked to come out to the porch. "Just for a little while," she would say. And they did. They always did. Those memories didn't hurt the way they once had. Time had softened their edges, rounding them into something gentler. Something he could carry without feeling weighed down. Mr. Ellis rested his elbows on his knees and looked out toward the yard. The maple tree stood tall, its branches stretching the way they always had. It had been there long before them, and it would be there long after. That thought used to make him uneasy. Now, it brought a strange kind of comfort. Life, he realized, wasn't made of the big moments people talk about. It was made of mornings like this, of porches, of shared quiet, of memories layered gently on top of one another, like thin blankets on a cool day. He inhaled slowly, then let the breath go. The past didn't pull at him anymore. It sat beside him, politely, like an old friend who knew when to speak and when not to. Mr. Ellis straightened slightly in his chair. The present waited patiently in front of him, just as calm, just as open. And for the first time that morning, he became aware of something else approaching the porch. Not a memory. Not yet. Something small. Mr. Ellis didn't notice it at first. His gaze was still resting on the yard, on the way the light slipped quietly between the leaves of the maple tree. His thoughts had settled into that familiar, gentle space, where nothing pressed too hard for attention. Then movement. Not sudden, not loud, just a slight shift at the edge of his vision. A small bird fluttered down and landed on the porch rail, no more than a few feet from where Mr. Ellis sat. Its wings folded neatly against its body, as if it had done this many times before. The rail dipped almost imperceptibly beneath its weight. Mr. Ellis froze, not out of fear, out of respect. He held still, his hand resting lightly on his knee, his breath slowing without conscious effort. The bird remained where it was, its tiny head tilting from side to side, dark eyes alert but unafraid. They regarded each other quietly. The bird was small, smaller than he would have expected. Its feathers were a soft mix of browns and muted grays, blending easily with the weathered wood of the rail. One foot shifted, then the other, as if it were testing the morning. Mr. Ellis had seen plenty of birds from this porch, hundreds, over the years. They came and went, hopping through the yard or lifting off from the maple tree in quick bursts of motion. But this one had chosen the rail, so close he could see the subtle rise and fall of its chest. Mr. Ellis didn't move. He didn't reach for the cloth. He didn't lift his mug. He simply sat, allowing the moment to unfold without interruption. The bird chirped once soft, almost tentative, then fell silent again. For reasons he couldn't quite explain, Mr. Ellis felt something loosen inside his chest. A small release, like a knot he hadn't realized he was carrying, had eased just slightly. He had learned, over time, that moments like this couldn't be rushed. They couldn't be captured or improved upon. They only asked one thing of you: to be present. The breeze passed through again, lifting a few feathers along the bird's back. It didn't startle. It stayed right where it was, balanced and calm. Mr. Ellis watched, his eyes gentle, his expression unchanged except for a softness that had settled there naturally. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The porch felt different now, not fuller, just awake. The bird turned its head and looked out toward the yard, then back toward Mr. Ellis, as if acknowledging him before returning to its own quiet observations. The world seemed to narrow to that small stretch of rail, to that shared pause in the morning. Time moved, but it did so carefully. Mr. Ellis became aware of how still he was sitting, of how even his thoughts had slowed to match the bird's easy presence. The usual hum of memory and reflection faded into the background. There was only this: a man, a porch, a small bird resting where it pleased. He thought, briefly, of Maggie, of how she would have noticed it immediately, how she might have whispered something about the bird's courage or its trust. The thought passed without sadness, leaving behind a faint warmth instead. The bird hopped once along the rail, closer now. Mr. Ellis felt no urge to move away. He trusted the stillness between them. Another quiet chirp. Then silence again. The morning held its breath. For a moment that felt longer than it was, the bird remained. And in that moment, Mr. Ellis felt something simple and unexpected settle into place. A reminder, perhaps, that even now, especially now, life still found him, not in grand gestures, not in loud arrivals, but in small, living things that landed gently, right where he was willing to notice them. The bird shifted its wings, and Mr. Ellis waited, calm and unhurried, to see what would happen next. The bird stayed, not because it had to, not because it was trapped. It stayed because, for this moment, the porch felt safe. Mr. Ellis watched without staring, his gaze soft, unfocused in the way it became when he didn't want to disturb what was happening. He had learned long ago that attention could be gentle, that noticing didn't have to feel like pressure. The bird shifted its weight again, claws gripping the rail with practiced ease. Its head tilted, then stilled, as if it, too, were listening to the morning. Mr. Ellis found himself breathing more slowly, matching the quiet rhythm unfolding in front of him. He became aware of small things, the faint sound of leaves brushing against one another, the distant hum of a car several streets away, the warmth of the mug resting against his palm. These details had always been there. He knew that. But now, they seemed clearer somehow, sharper, without being loud, as if the world had gently leaned closer. Mr. Ellis noticed how little he wanted to move, not out of stiffness, not out of caution, but because stillness felt right. The bird gave a tiny shake, feathers settling back into place. For a brief moment, Mr. Ellis thought of himself of the way he had learned, over the years, to adjust quietly to the shape life had taken, not fighting it, not resisting, just finding balance where he stood. It struck him then how much he and this small creature shared. Both had arrived at this moment without ceremony. Both carried the marks of time in subtle ways. Both were simply here. The thought didn't make him sad. It didn't make him proud. It made him feel steady. Mr. Ellis realized he hadn't thought about the past for several minutes now. No memories tugged at him, no regrets surfaced. Even Maggie's presence, which often hovered gently at the edges of his thoughts, had stepped back, allowing the moment to stand on its own. That felt new and unexpected. The bird hopped again, this time turning slightly toward the yard. Mr. Ellis followed the movement with his eyes, slow and unhurried. He noticed the way sunlight caught along the curve of the bird's wing, the way the rail beneath it looked smoother where countless hands and now tiny feet had passed. He thought about how often he had wiped that rail. How many mornings had begun with that same simple motion? How many days had unfolded from this exact spot? And still, life found new ways to arrive. Mr. Ellis felt a quiet gratitude settle in, not sharp or overwhelming, but steady. The kind that doesn't demand expression. The kind that simply exists, warm and patient. He didn't label it as gratitude at first. He just felt lighter. The bird chirped again, slightly louder this time, then fell silent. It wasn't a song, just a sound, a presence making itself known before returning to stillness. Mr. Ellis nodded once, almost without realizing it. He understood something then, not as a clear thought, but as a gentle awareness. That slowing down hadn't made his world smaller. It had made it clearer, that there was still room, even now, for small surprises. For moments that asked nothing more than his attention. The porch, the rail, the bird, the quiet, all of it fit together in a way that felt complete. Mr. Ellis shifted his mug slightly, careful not to disturb the balance of the moment. The bird didn't flinch. It remained where it was, calm and unbothered. They shared the space for another stretch of time, neither hurrying the other. And in that shared stillness, Mr. Ellis noticed something else. A sense that this moment, this small, ordinary moment, was doing something gentle inside him, something subtle, something that didn't need to be named. Yet, the bird didn't leave all at once. It shifted its weight first, wings lifting slightly, then settling again, as if it were deciding something, as if it, too, was in no hurry to move on. Mr. Ellis noticed the change immediately, not with concern, just awareness. He stayed still, giving the moment the space it seemed to need. His hands rested quietly in his lap now, the mug balanced easily, forgotten for the time being. He felt calm in a way that didn't require explanation. The bird looked toward the yard once more. Then it looked up. Its wings opened with a soft, almost soundless motion. There was no sudden burst, no frantic flutter, just a gentle push against the air, and then it was gone, lifting itself cleanly from the porch rail and disappearing into the morning. The rail was empty again. Mr. Ellis didn't feel the absence the way he might have expected. There was no sharp drop, no hollow space. Instead, something remained. He exhaled slowly, realizing he'd been holding his breath without knowing it. The porch seemed to return to itself, quiet and familiar, unchanged in every visible way, and yet, something inside him had shifted just enough to notice. He rested his hand on the rail where the bird had been moments before. The wood was cool, smooth beneath his fingers, solid, real. Mr. Ellis stayed like that for a while, his palm against the rail, his gaze drifting back toward the yard. The maple tree swayed gently, its leaves catching the light. Somewhere beyond the fence, the bird's song rose briefly, then faded. He smiled then, not a wide smile, just a small one, the kind that arrives without effort. It occurred to him that the bird hadn't brought anything with it, no message, no meaning spelled out clearly, and yet, it had given him something all the same. A reminder, perhaps, that not everything that visits is meant to stay, and not everything that leaves takes something away. Mr. Ellis thought about how many moments he had once tried to hold on to, how tightly he had gripped certain days, certain years, afraid that letting go meant losing them forever. Age had taught him otherwise. Some things stayed with you precisely because you didn't try to keep them. The realization settled gently, like the warmth of the mug he lifted again, taking a slow sip. The coffee had cooled slightly, but he didn't mind. He never had. He looked at the empty chair across from him. For the first time that morning, it didn't feel quite so empty. Not because someone might sit there, but because it no longer needed to prove anything. It simply existed, just like him. Mr. Ellis adjusted his sweater and leaned back, letting the morning continue around him. The day was still young. There was no schedule pressing in, no task demanding attention, only the quiet after a small arrival, and the space it left behind. He understood something then, clearly enough to hold but gently enough not to weigh him down, that his life hadn't grown smaller with time. It had grown more precise, more attuned to what mattered, more open to what arrived softly. The bird had come and gone in a matter of moments. Anyone else might have missed it. Anyone else might have forgotten it just as quickly. But Mr. Ellis hadn't, because he had been ready not for anything extraordinary, but for something real. He rested his mug back on the porch table and stood slowly, feeling steady on his feet. He reached for the cloth again, folding it carefully in his hands before setting it down. There was a pause. Then he wiped the rail once more. Not out of habit this time, but out of appreciation. The rail shone faintly in the morning light, just as it always had. The porch returned to its familiar stillness, yet beneath it all, something had eased open inside Mr. Ellis. A quiet understanding that even now, especially now, life still met him where he was, and it did so gently. The morning moved on, just as it always did. Mr. Ellis remained on the porch a little while longer, not because he was waiting for anything but because there was no need to rush away from what felt settled. The quiet after the bird's departure felt different now, not empty, simply open. He reached for the small tin that held birdseed and shook a modest amount into the feeder by the rail. He didn't do it every morning, only when it felt right. The sound of the seeds landing was soft, almost thoughtful. There was no expectation attached to the gesture. If another bird came, it came. If not, that was fine too. Mr. Ellis wiped his hands on his trousers and glanced down the street. Mrs. Harper was already outside, adjusting the flowers near her porch. She looked up, caught his eye, and gave a small wave. He returned it, just a lift of the hand. Nothing more. It was enough. The maple leaves rustled gently overhead. Sunlight shifted again, climbing higher now, warming the porch in a way that promised a mild day. Mr. Ellis noticed how comfortable he felt in his own skin at that moment, how the tightness he sometimes carried in his chest had loosened without effort. He sat back down, this time resting his arms along the chair, his posture easier than before. The empty chair across from him caught the light briefly, then slipped back into shade. It no longer pulled at his attention. Inside, the house waited quietly. There would be things to do later, a loose hinge on the gate that needed tightening, a note he meant to write to Tommy's teacher, a rose bush that would need watering once the sun climbed a little higher. But none of it needed him yet. Mr. Ellis took another sip of coffee and smiled to himself, the expression small but genuine. He felt no urge to mark the moment, no desire to explain it to anyone else. It belonged to him, complete as it was. The porch felt like home in a deeper way now, not because it had changed, but because he had. He stood again, slower this time, and stepped down from the porch, pausing to glance back at the rail. It looked just as it always had, weathered, familiar, quietly dependable. He ran the cloth along it one last time, smoothing the surface with care, then folded the cloth and placed it back where it belonged. The act felt finished. Inside, he rinsed his mug and set it upside down to dry, the small crack catching the light once more. He didn't linger. He didn't need to. When he returned to the porch, the feeder was already being noticed. A sparrow hovered nearby, uncertain but curious, before settling on the edge. Mr. Ellis watched from a distance. He didn't move closer. He didn't need to. He sat back down, his hands resting easily on his thighs, and allowed the day to continue its quiet unfolding. The world, he realized, didn't require constant attention to remain kind. Sometimes, it simply asked you to notice, and then let go. As the minutes passed, the street grew a little livelier. A car pulled out of a driveway. Someone laughed. A door closed and opened again somewhere nearby. Life, in all its ordinary ways, resumed its gentle rhythm. Mr. Ellis felt ready for it. Not eager, just ready. The moment with the bird had already settled into him, finding its place without being asked. It didn't demand memory or meaning. It simply softened the edges of the morning and made space for what came next. He leaned back, closed his eyes briefly, and let the warmth of the sun rest against his face. The day had begun, and Mr. Ellis was exactly where he needed to be. Later that evening, the porch looked much the same as it always did. The light had softened, stretching longer shadows across the boards. The air carried a cooler edge now, hinting gently at night. Mr. Ellis stepped outside once more, this time without his mug, without the cloth, without any particular purpose at all. He stood for a moment, hands resting at his sides, and took in the quiet. The rail was empty, the feeder still, the street calm, and yet, the day felt fuller than it had when it began. Mr. Ellis sat down slowly, easing himself into the chair on the right. The porch welcomed him the way it always had, without comment or expectation. He leaned back and let his gaze drift upward, watching the sky settle into its evening colors. He thought about the bird again, not with excitement, not with longing, just with a soft awareness that it had been there and that it had mattered. The moment hadn't changed his life. It hadn't rewritten his past or promised anything new. It had simply arrived, quietly, and reminded him of something he had nearly forgotten. That life still came to him, not in big ways, not in ways that asked him to hurry or prove anything, but in small, gentle moments that asked only for his attention. Mr. Ellis realized then that this was what age had given him, not less life, as he once feared, but a clearer view of it. The ability to notice what others might pass by, the patience to let moments be exactly what they were, without asking them to become more. He rested his hands on his knees and breathed in slowly. Somewhere nearby, a bird called out. Not the same one, perhaps, or maybe it was. It didn't matter. The sound floated through the evening air and then faded, leaving the quiet intact. Mr. Ellis smiled, faintly. He thought of Maggie not with ache, but with gratitude, of mornings shared, of silences that never needed filling, of how she had always believed that the smallest things often carried the most meaning. She had been right. The porch creaked softly beneath him as he shifted his weight. He didn't mind the sound. He welcomed it. Proof that things were still holding him, still supporting his presence in this world. The sky darkened another shade. Lights flicked on down the street, one by one. Somewhere, a television hummed. Somewhere else, dishes clinked in a sink. Life continued. And Mr. Ellis felt no need to chase it. He was already part of it. He stood at last and turned toward the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. He looked once more at the rail, the feeder, the quiet space where something small had landed that morning. The space didn't feel empty. It felt open, and that, he understood, was enough. Sometimes, the most meaningful moments don't announce themselves. They arrive softly. They stay briefly, and they leave behind a calm you carry with you. Mr. Ellis stepped inside and closed the door gently behind him. The porch settled into silence again, and somewhere in that quiet, a simple truth lingered unspoken but felt, that life doesn't grow smaller when we slow down. It grows kinder. And if we're willing to notice, it still finds its way to us, one gentle moment at a time.